Marta Lund had 30 days to be gone, and a cold that could kill a grown man in 3 hours. It was January of 1881, in the North Country of Minnesota, and the snow had not stopped since October. 11 days straight, the thermometer had sat below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Out on the open ground, the drifts swallowed fence posts whole. Strong as an ox, gone like a candle. That was how the cold took men that winter. Her husband Erik was 6 weeks in the ground. No children, no brothers in the county, no man to speak for her. And the man who came for her land knew every bit of it. Erik Voss, the county road supervisor, drove his horse to the edge of the Lund property, looked at a widow he had already stopped seeing, and told her she had 30 days to clear off before the deep of winter finished what the fever had started. A widow alone, he said, had no standing to hold a claim through a second winter. He had a buyer in mind. He always did. Marta thanked him politely and said she would consider his offer. The county decided she had lost her wits to grief. They laughed at what she did next. They did not help. By the time they understood what she was building out there in the drifts, the same men who had driven her into the cold would be on their knees at its mouth, begging her to let them in. What none of them knew was that Marta Lund had not come to that claim helpless. She had grown up 200 miles north, on the edge of the boundary waters, among Norwegian and Finnish families who had been fighting cold since before Minnesota was a state. Her father had built winter camps for a living. Her mother had kept a family alive through the winter of 1866, the one the old-timers still called the year the animals lay down. Marta had been building snow shelters since she was 8 years old, not as a game, but against the day the cabin burned or the storm came too fast to outrun. That evening she walked the north side of her property, where the snow had packed hard against the tree line, and she began to dig. A quinzhee is not an igloo. An igloo is built from cut blocks of consolidated snow, layer by fitted layer, and it requires the right kind of snow, wind-packed, dense, homogeneous, that does not exist everywhere. A quinzhee is something older and simpler. You pile loose snow into a mound as tall as a man, higher if you have the strength, and you let it sit for 2 hours while the crystals inside center and bond under the weight. Then you hollow it out from one end, leaving walls 2 handspans thick, and what you have is a dome that the wind cannot penetrate and that the cold cannot easily reach, because packed snow is one of the best insulating materials that nature provides for free. The outside temperature can sit at 40 below, and the inside of a well-made quinzhee will hold it just above freezing on body heat alone. Inuit children have slept through Arctic nights in quinzhees, with nothing but their clothes and a candle. Marta's father had sheltered his entire dog team in one for 3 days, during a storm that had killed 3 men in open cabins 10 miles away. The neighbors did not know this. What they saw, when they drove past on the county road, was a widow alone in a field, piling snow in the dark. Some of them called out asking what she was doing. Marta told them she was preparing for the cold spell. They laughed, and one man said she would be better off packing her trunk. Erik Voss heard about it and shook his head. He told his wife the woman had gone strange from grief, which was a common enough thing, and that she would be gone by February one way or another. Marta built not 1 quinzhee, but 3. The first was for herself, large enough to stand in, with a sleeping bench carved from the snow on one side and a low tunnel entrance that trapped warm air inside. She marked the walls by pushing sticks through the exterior before hollowing, so she would know when the walls were thick enough. She smoothed the ceiling into a dome. She made a small ventilation hole at the crown. With a stick she could pull free or replace as needed. The second was smaller, for her 2 remaining laying hens and the rooster. She had read once, in a Swedish farming manual her mother had owned, that hens in a well-insulated space would continue laying even in hard cold if they were kept above 20 degrees. The theory had seemed doubtful to her until the winter of 1878, when she had tested it herself with a henhouse banked in hay. The quinzhee was colder than a banked henhouse in mild weather, but warmer in extreme cold, because extreme cold is where snow insulation outperforms everything else. The third quinzhee she built over her root cellar entrance, an insulating porch that would keep the cellar door accessible even if the snow reached the eaves of the cabin. She finished the work in 3 nights. She moved her bedding and her lamp and her cooking pot into the first one. She left the cabin standing. It was still her cabin, claim dispute or not, but she let the fire in it go low to save wood. On the morning of January 14th, the temperature dropped to 43 below zero Fahrenheit. The thermometer nailed to the cabin doorpost showed it, and Marta looked at it and went back inside the Quincy. The cold came down on that county like a verdict. 3 families in the valley had let their wood supplies run short, trusting that the worst of January would be over by mid-month as it usually was. They were burning furniture by the 3rd day. The Halverson family, 7 people in a single-room claim house, gathered in their kitchen and kept one stove burning constantly and still could not get the room above 40 degrees. 2 of the Halverson children developed frostbite on their feet without leaving the house. The Bremer household, half a mile west of Marta, lost their water supply when the pump froze solid in its shaft. They melted snow for drinking water over the stove, which used wood they could not afford to spare. Old Carl Bremer came down the road on the 5th day with a handcart and asked Marta, through her Quincy entrance, whether she had any wood she could sell. She said she had some. She did not ask him to apologize for laughing at her. Aldrich Voss's own house, a properly built frame house with good insulation and a full wood pile, held through the cold spell without any of these problems. But his claim house, the one he intended to sell to the buyer he had in mind, sat empty on the section north of Marta's property, and the cold got into the walls and burst the water pipes, which had been installed in a house that was never meant to sit unheated through a Minnesota winter. When the cold lifted on January 23rd, there were 3 cracked pipes and a collapsed cistern in that house, and the buyer's interest cooled considerably. Marta's hens had not stopped laying. She had gone into the hen Quincy twice a day, morning and afternoon, and the birds had been warm enough to keep producing. Not at full summer rates, but steadily, reliably, 1 egg per bird per day most mornings. She had a wooden crate with 31 eggs in it by the end of the cold spell. Eggs in January, in a county where most people's hens had gone dormant since November. She had not told anyone about the eggs. When the thaw came, not a true thaw, just a rise to 12 above, a woman named Sigrid Halverson came to the Lund property. She was the wife of the man who had asked Marta what she was building. She had a baby on her hip, and she looked tired in the way that 8 days of extreme cold makes a person look tired, as if their energy had been burned for heat. She asked Marta if she had any eggs. Her children hadn't had eggs in 2 months. Marta sold her 6 eggs at a price that was fair. Sigrid Halverson looked at the Quincy's, the snow mounds, the smooth-packed walls, the tunnel entrance with its felt flap, the small ventilation hole at the crown, and she asked what they were exactly. Marta explained. Sigrid listened carefully. Then she said, "Erik would have been proud of you." It was the first time anyone had said his name to Marta since the funeral. In the days after the cold spell, people came to look at the Quincy's more than Marta expected. Not Voss. He did not come. But others did. The Halverson men came and stood outside them, and Marta let them look inside. The schoolteacher from the valley came and asked her to explain the construction in detail, because she said she intended to teach it to the older children as part of their winter safety lesson. A trapper named Sundqvist, who worked the timber line north of the county, came by and looked at the hen Quincy for a long time and asked whether it had really worked, whether the birds had really kept laying. Marta showed him the crate. "I've used a Quincy for emergency shelter," he said, "but I never thought to winter livestock in one." "Snow doesn't know the difference," Marta said. He thought about that. Then he said, "You should teach this." She said she would consider it. The 30 days that Aldrich Voss had given her came and went. On the 31st day, Voss came to the property with a paper in his hand, as he had said he would. He found Marta outside the main Quincy, patching a soft spot in the wall with packed snow. The hen Quincy was behind her. Cabin was intact. The woodpile was more than half remaining, and there were boot tracks in the snow from at least a dozen different visitors. Voss told her his lawyer had reviewed the claim documents and was prepared to file. Marta said her own letters to the county land office were already in the mail, and that she had written to the Homestead Examiner in St. Paul describing the circumstances of her husband's death and the timing of the claim dispute. She said she had also written a short account of the cold spell of January 1881 to the Farming Journal in Minneapolis, including the hen egg results, and that the journal had expressed interest in publishing it. Voss stood in the cold for a moment. "The buyer isn't interested anymore anyway," he said. "The pipe damage is too much." "I know," Marta said. He left. The letters worked. The county land office recognized her continued occupation of the claim through the winter as valid tenure. The Homestead Examiner in St. Paul wrote back within 3 weeks, cordial and businesslike, and the claim dispute was quietly dropped. Aldrich Voss filed no papers. The Farming Journal published Marta's account in March. It was a brief piece, practical and specific. How to site a quinsy, how long to let it sinter before hollowing, how to mark the walls, how to ventilate. It mentioned the egg results. It said nothing about the claim dispute, or the neighbors, or Aldrich Voss. The mail that came after the publication was the most she had received in her life. Letters from women in the Dakotas, from a man in northern Wisconsin, from a family in Canada who had seen the journal in a library. Most of them asked the same question. Had she really kept hens laying through 43 below in a snow shelter? She wrote back to all of them. Yes, she had. Here is how. Erik Lund had been a quiet, steady man who had cleared the land and built the cabin and never said much about the cold because he believed in preparation over complaint. Marta had learned the quinsy from her father, but she had learned the principle behind it. Build the thing before you need it, not after, from watching Erik work. She stayed on the claim through the spring, through the summer, through the following winter, and the one after that. She proved up the land in 1883 as required. She sold eggs through every winter at fair prices. She taught the quinsy method to anyone who asked. And she thought sometimes about what Aldrich Voss had said, that whatever she could carry on a single sledge, she was welcome to take. He had meant it as a diminishment. He had not understood what she could build from what the ground already held. The cold was not the enemy. The cold was the material. If this story made you think of someone who built something solid from what others threw away, leave their name in the comments. Stories like these deserve to be remembered. And if you want to hear more of them, the women history passed over, and what they were quietly building all along, subscribe to this channel. We tell one story at a time, and we don't rush them.